And Yaqeen Institute published a study where, shockingly, for Muslims only, 1 out of 4 young people no longer identify with their faith. That's an insanely high number, if you ask me. That's almost 25%. And one of the reasons why this tends to occur, where people are no longer identifying with their faith, because if you're grown up overseas, that idea is almost unthinkable. And one of the reasons is because if you go overseas, and I was just overseas, let me tell you, God's in the air. As Andrew Tate will tell you, recently he was asked, why did you abandon Christianity for Islam? You know what he said? He said, when I go to Muslim countries, God is in the air. And for real, you go to Makkah and Medina in particular, when it's time for Dhuhr, temperature is 115, and you have that entire society marshalling and marching towards the mosque. The whole city is in motion, heading towards that one center. It's a sight to behold. The vibe and the feel is immaculate. When you grow up in a society like that, when you actually get to hear the adhan, Allah is dominant. There's an overarching point that tethers us all. You grow up in a society like that, faith to you is like breathing. Which of course there's its pros and cons, because you can take your faith for granted, which many Muslims overseas do. But at the same time, you don't have to worry about 25% of the youth no longer identifying with their faith. So it's a double-edged sword, right? God's in the air. What happened in Western society in particular, if you follow philosophy, one of the great philosophers of the last 200 years, Friedrich Nietzsche, he said famously at the end of the 19th century, he said, God is dead. Astaghfirullah. What did he mean by that though? He meant that God in Europe is no longer defining morality. God and revelation will no longer play a pivotal role in Western Europe when it comes to ethics, morals, what's right, what's wrong, what's vice, what's virtue. God has no longer the final say. And boy was he right. And this was a serious atheist, by the way. He understood the inevitable consequences of atheism, which is nihilism and hopelessness, and he felt that because of the vacuum that Christianity is about to leave behind, nihilism will fill the void, or totalitarian ideologies. And he was very prophetic in his predictions, because the 20th century was a massive bloodbath of those totalitarian ideologies like fascism and communism. So we're growing up in a time where secular liberalism basically reigns supreme, and God has been evicted from the public place. And therefore a lot of our youth, well, all of us growing up in this society, we don't palpably, tangibly feel God. It's not a reality that the society lives by, as is the case overseas. Although I hear in some parts of Michigan, they're starting to do adhan publicly. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Anybody heard of that? Some parts of, yeah, alhamdulillah, I heard at the London Bridge, there was an adhan that was made, and obviously, I don't know if you heard, but in Times Square, Taraweeh was done. So Islam is coming. Of course, many of them are scared stiff in the process, but deen is on the rise, inshallah, inshallah.